Hello everyone, I'm Jake DeWeese. Today I'm doing my presentation on fracking and their correlation with earthquakes. This is a topic that means a lot to me because I'm from north of Pittsburgh, and in my neighborhood there have been a ton of fracking wells that have been going up, so it's a little bit of a concern to me to see this environmental impact. But here we go. Now over here you're going to see a map of the US and a graph down below, and this graph basically splits these earthquakes up into two parts. The blue part of the graph here that steadily increases covers the time period of 1973 to 2008, but we're more concerned with this hockey stick curve part of the graph, this red part here. This is tracking data from 2009 to the current day. And you're seeing a huge uptick in earthquakes recorded above a 3 on the seismic scale, which is enough that you can feel the earthquake. It's not necessarily doing a ton of damage, but if you're just standing on the ground, you're going to feel the quake a little bit. Now this map kind of points towards where these quakes are happening. We're seeing a lot of these quakes from 2009 to the current day happening in Texas and Oklahoma. That's where most of the concentration is. What's weird is that up in PA, Ohio, West Virginia area, where there is a good amount of fracking going on, we're not seeing a huge amount of seismic activity, which is of interest to me, and we'll talk a little bit about that later in the show. But despite all these earthquakes, only 2 in Texas and Oklahoma have been recorded at above a 5 on the seismic scale. The one that happened in Oklahoma destroyed 17 homes. So we're seeing that these can cause damage, but it's not a huge amount of damage. So there is one big misconception though with fracking and their correlation with earthquakes. It's not the actual fracking of the wells that has anything to do with causing seismic activity. It's the disposal of wastewater after they're done fracking the wells. They just inject it back into the well. And what this does is it kind of acts as a lubricant along these fault lines, and the fault lines become more prone to slipping after these companies inject their wastewater into wastewater wells. This correlation has been recognized by the EPA since 1990, but only recently with the boom in the fracking industry are people really paying attention to this. There's a huge economic impact and a reason why the industry wants to continue to inject wastewater, because it's cheap. It's really cheap. You can do it on site. There's not a whole lot of external costs involved with it, and they're not really held responsible for the earthquakes that are tied to injecting wastewater. The industry used to export its wastewater, but that's not really a popular method anymore. It's more expensive to export it to be treated. And there's actually policies that are starting to be against treating this wastewater. So cutting off the flow or diverting it would also increase the cost to dispose of this wastewater. Ohio actually, interestingly enough, used to have an industry built around treating the wastewater from these fracking wells, which kind of leads us back to the PA, West Virginia, Ohio connection. The Marcellus shale rock that is in this region is not really accepting of the injection of wastewater, so fracking wells around here have to export their wastewater out to be treated. The EPA, though, wants to limit how much of this water can be treated. They've noticed that there's been contamination, or a risk thereof, contamination of our water supply. The main concern is this bromide and chlorine mix has been linked to bladder cancer, miscarriages, myriad of health concerns. So what this kind of does is it limits the options for what the industry can do. Government has proposed a solution though to just have the industry release its seismic activity data so that they can examine it and see if there's an uptick in seismic activity, say, hey, you have to cut off your flow or divert your flow. Now, it will cost the industry, and they're not going to like that, but it's currently one of the only solutions being proposed right now, with the exporting of the wastewater for treatment being kind of limited. But it is of interest because these earthquakes have a compounding effect. The more that happen, the higher in seismic scale, they grow more powerful as more and more happen, especially when they're so concentrated in that Texas, Oklahoma region. But the government really doesn't have an interest in shutting down the industry. There's a lot of energy to be had, and there's no reason that both parties can't work together.